Banks are the backbone of any economy. Officially, the Federal Reserve System is the only institution with the right to create money. But what if I told you that every bank has the right to create money? Theoretically, you could start a bank and begin creating money, but there's an easier way. Why spend so much money opening a bank when you can launch a cryptocurrency and become a crypto billionaire overnight? At least, that's what has been happening lately. If cryptocurrencies seem like a scam to you, it's probably because you don't know much about banks. In this video, we're going to explore 5 truths about money that banks don't want you to know. Because if everyone knew, it could mean the end of the banking system. Or as Henry Ford once said, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." So if you're ready, leave a like on this video. If you enjoy this channel, don't waste any time. Subscribe now, and let's get back to the video. 1. The truth about keeping your money in a bank. Keeping your money in a bank is a scam. Let me ask you a question. How much interest would you earn by depositing your savings in a bank? At first glance, it seems like it should be at least a few percent to make any sense, right? However, if you look at the numbers, it's far from that. Some major banks literally offer less than 0.5%. There are banks that offer slightly higher rates, but even then, they rarely reach 1%. Especially now with interest rates at some of their lowest levels. Think about it. Your money grows 0.5%, while inflation is 2.5%. The intrinsic value of your wealth is literally decreasing every year. You would actually be better off spending that money today than saving it in a bank. The purchasing power of your money a few years from now will be much lower than it is today. And when inflation spikes, as it is happening now, asset prices, like real estate and stocks, rise exponentially, as we've seen over the past year, for example. A bank is just a place to park your money, not to grow it. 2. Every bank has the right to create money. Every bank has the right to create money out of thin air. If I told you that banks actually create money, you probably wouldn't believe it, because officially, the only institution with the right to create money is the Federal Reserve System. It is the source of the dollar and the only entity with access to the money printing machine. However, the banking system operates in such a way that any bank, in the United States or elsewhere, can create money to a certain extent, based on the amount people have deposited into it. For example, if you deposit $1,000 into Bank A, what do you think the bank will do with that money? It doesn't make sense for them to just leave the money sitting there. They couldn't even afford to pay you the 0.5% interest. So the bank lends your money to someone who wants to buy a car or a house, charging interest that is often much higher than the 0.5% they pay you. The average credit card interest rate is around 20%, literally dozens of times more than what the bank offers you. And here's the main point. The bank never tells you to whom they are lending your money. When you access your account, the bank shows that your money is still there and that you can withdraw it at any time. But if your money is still in your account, where did the bank get the money to lend to someone else? This is known as the fractional reserve system. Banks are required to keep only 10% of deposits as reserves and can lend out the rest. For every $1,000 you deposit, the bank creates another $900 and lends it to someone else, raising the total to $1,900. That $900 was created out of thin air. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's all just digits on a computer. 3. You can make money by borrowing. In July 2012, Mark Zuckerberg financed his $5.95 million home, located just 3 miles from Facebook's headquarters, with a 30-year mortgage. At the time, he was 28 years old and ranked as the 40th richest person in the world, with an estimated net worth of $15.6 billion. The question is, why would someone who has billions of dollars and could buy multiple $6 million homes outright choose to take on debt? The answer is simple. Free money. It sounds unreal, I know. After all, who would give free money, especially to a billionaire, unless it was charity? But it all comes down to interest rates. Remember when we talked about how banks offer such low returns on savings that it's not even worth keeping your money there, because it doesn't beat inflation, causing a loss of value? Well, in this case, the logic flips. The inflation rate in the United States ranges between 2.5% and 3.2%. This means that any loan with an interest rate below inflation is considered free money. Zuckerberg's mortgage rate was just slightly above 1.05%. Doing the math, the bank loses money because the mortgage rate is lower than inflation. Let's illustrate it. Suppose you borrow $1 million at a rate of 1.05%. Before the pandemic, the average return on a savings account was around 2.4%. So let's use that rate for simplicity. This means that if you deposited the $1 million in another bank, you would earn $24,000 a year, while paying only $10,500 annually, 1.05%, to the bank that lent you the money. Now imagine doing this with $100 million, or even $1 billion. When you can borrow free money, it doesn't make sense to lock up your own capital when you could use it for more profitable investments. Of course, for smaller amounts, this strategy might not make much sense because the difference is small. But when we're talking about large amounts, even a variation of 1%, 2%, or even 0.5% can mean tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. 4. The richer you are, the lower the rate you pay. Remember that banks are not charitable institutions. They are businesses like any other, whose goal is to maximize profits. They have shareholders to answer to, and if their business model isn't profitable, they won't survive. That's why they are much more comfortable lending money to someone wealthy than to someone with fewer resources. When you're a billionaire, the bank has nothing to worry about, because no one imagines you'll default on your loan. And even if something happens, you can easily sell part of your business to pay off your debt. This makes lending to you almost risk-free. Historically, the banking system evolved this way. Banks only worked with the nobility or people who had money or assets that generated steady income, like land. Compare that to the average worker, who might get sick, lose their job, or simply be unable to handle debt. If you're barely managing to pay your bills, lending money to you is extremely risky. It's easy to criticize banks for this, but think about it. Would you feel comfortable lending money to a friend who barely makes enough to survive, or to one who owns a thriving business? Probably the latter, as harsh as that may sound. If you want a lower mortgage rate, lower credit card interest, or better loan terms, you first need to improve your financial situation. Banks also offer ultra-low mortgage rates to build strong relationships with wealthy individuals. That way, when these clients need larger loans, they will come back to the same bank. It's a win-win situation. However, technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies promise to change this scenario by democratizing access to the financial system. Although they haven't completely revolutionized the sector yet, financial services are much more accessible today than they were 100 years ago. Today, practically everyone has access to these services, something unimaginable a century ago. 5. Credit cards are the bank's secret weapons. According to a study, 2/3 of Americans have debt, meaning that out of every 10 Americans, 7 are in debt. And guess what is the biggest cause of this situation? Credit cards. Think for a moment about what that means. Credit card debt isn't like a mortgage with 3.5% annual interest rates. We're talking about something around 20%. If you can't pay off your credit card debt now, what makes you think you'll be able to pay it off in a few months, when it will have grown even more? In other words, 70% of Americans are about to fall into the debt trap. This is how banks make fortunes, because most people spend without thinking about how they'll pay later. They get used to a certain standard of living and are willing to maintain it even if they can't afford it. That's why banks keep calling to offer new credit cards. Don't get me wrong, using credit cards responsibly is a great way to build a good financial history. But if you don't have financial discipline, you definitely shouldn't get caught in this debt trap. If you enjoyed this video, you're definitely going to love this next one I prepared especially for you. Now, leave a like that this video deserves, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.